It is time for the Congress, Republicans and Democrats, to stop encouraging, exhorting, and forcing banks to make low-income loans with no documentation. Stop that. The Community Reinvestment Act, which was passed in the mid-90s, which was extended in the early 2000s, literally pushed these lenders to make low-income loans.
Basically a lot of bad mortgages or a lot of bad securitized debt that's out there. It also has to be about the cause of the problem. The root cause of this is the housing foreclosure crisis. Still is today.
The Great Depression. It lasted a decade and spawned the New Deal, the greatest expansion of the U.S. government in history. And part of that legacy is at the root of the current crisis. The Federal National Mortgage Association, better known as Fannie Mae, created in 1938.
In the New Deal, Roosevelt said more Americans should have housing.
In 1968, Lyndon Johnson and a Democratic Congress were in the midst of another huge expansion of the federal government. The array of new social programs known as the Great Society. In that year, LBJ privatized Fannie Mae. The risks kept rising over the years, in part because the federal government wanted it that way. In particular, there was the Community Reinvestment Act, or CRA, passed in 1977 during Jimmy Carter's first year in office. The law increased oversight of financial institutions to ensure that they were giving credit to low-income families so that more people would have the chance to own homes.
But the law went overboard. Institutions made loans they probably didn't want to make because they couldn't seem racist. You might not be allowed to do things you were going to do regular course of business, such as merge with another bank. It empowered these community groups who would then bully the banks. Acorn bullied the banks.
Indeed, Acorn, the associations of community organizers for Reform Now, would before long come up with a new tactic, challenging a thrift merger in Illinois, claiming they didn't make the kind of loans that Acorn felt were required under the CRA. The bank complained such loans would be financially irresponsible. A young community organizer named Barack Obama worked closely with the Acorn activists behind the new strategy. And that strategy worked. Acorn prevailed in court, and soon credit standards were being lowered across the country. While at first Fannie actually resisted buying up some of those shaky mortgages, at the tail end of the Clinton administration, Fannie Mae was told to substantially increase the percentage of those mortgages in its portfolio.
There's an article in the New York Times in September of 1999, so during your administration, that says that your administration pressured Fannie Mae to increase the number of lower and middle income families and individuals who could get a mortgage and thus own a home, and that to accomplish that, Fannie Mae lowered their standard for credit, these subprime mortgages, and while the article said it was well-intentioned, it was dangerous. Would you agree with that?
I think through the lens of this, it looks like that was true.
I'm afraid the Democrats are a lot more culpable than the Republicans. The Democrats, Barney Frank, Chuck Schumer, have been the key supporters of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac for many, many years.
In 2003, the Bush administration nevertheless decided to take on the mortgage giants. It recommended significant regulatory changes, as then Treasury Secretary John Snow told the House Financial Services Committee more supervision was needed for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, known in Washington terms as government-supported enterprises, or GSEs.
We need a strong, world-class regulatory agency to oversee the prudential operations of the GSEs.
I think we see entities that are fundamentally sound financially. And
Democratic Representative Barney Frank was then the ranking member of the Financial Services Committee.
The more pressure there is there, then the less I think we see in terms of affordable housing.
Affordable housing. That was the primary concern of Democrats, even in the face of increasingly dire warnings about Fannie and Freddie.
It is indeed a very troubling report, but it is a report of extraordinary importance, not only to those who wish to own a home, but it's to the taxpayers of this country who would pay the cost of the cleanup of an enterprise failure.
Through nearly a dozen hearings where, frankly, we were trying to fix something that wasn't broke. Mr. Chairman, we do not have a crisis at Freddie Mac, and in particular at Fannie Mae, under the outstanding leadership of Mr. Frank Rain.
And now we have the opportunity to elect a new president. And we've got to be about the business, number one, of getting a commitment. We could have done a hell of a lot better with either Hillary or Obama, but now Obama is a presumptive nominee. He stands to be the president of the United States of America.
And as well as the fact that I'm just pissed off at Ophelia, because if it wasn't for you, I don't think that we'd be here in the first place. The direction and the mission of what the GSEs had, which they've done a tremendous job. There's been nothing that was indicated that's wrong, with Fannie Mae. Freddie Mac has come up on its own, and the question that then presents is the competence that your agency has with reference to deciding and regulating these GSEs.
I hope that we will move swiftly to create a new regulatory structure for Fannie Mae, for Freddie Mac, and the Federal Home Loan Banks.
This hearing is about the political lynching of Franklin Rain.
What would make you, why should I have confidence? Why should anyone have confidence in you as a regulator at this point?
Sorry, Congressman. Ophelia did not improperly apply accounting rules. Freddie Mac did. Ophelia did not try to manage earnings improperly. Freddie Mac did.
Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac wouldn't even come under it. They weren't under the 34 Act. They weren't under the 33 Act. They play by their own rules, and I'm tempted to ask how many people in this room are in the payroll of Fannie Mae.
You've imputed various motives to the people running the organization. You went to the board and put a 48-hour ultimatum on them without having any specific regulatory authority to put that kind of ultimatum on them.
But I have seen nothing in here that suggests that the safety and soundness of an issue, and I think it serves us badly to raise safety and soundness as a kind of a general shibboleth when it does not seem to me to be an issue.
Mr. Rain's $1.1 million bonus on a $526,000 salary. Jamie Gorelick, $779,000 bonus on a salary of $567,000.
These assets are so riskless that their capital for holding them should be under 2%.
Fannie and Freddie's defenders stepped up big time in 2005 when the Bush administration renewed its call for action.
These large portfolios, unchecked in their growth over the last decade or so, pose a real problem.
The Senate Banking Committee adopted strong legislation which would have stopped Fannie and Freddie from acquiring these bad mortgages. All of the Republicans on the committee voted for it. All of the Democrats, including now Chairman Chris Dodd, voted against. But the Democrats were able to block a vote by the whole Senate. In 2006, Senate Republicans introduced another bill to deal with the mushrooming problem. One of its sponsors, John McCain.
McCain made a statement on the floor of the Senate saying that it was necessary to adopt this bill.
But once again, the votes went along party lines. Republicans for, Democrats against. With the Democrats in the majority, the bill failed.
I think the responsibility that the Democrats have may rest more in resisting any efforts by Republicans in the Congress or by me when I was president to put some standards and tighten up a little on Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Now, some of you have heard me in the past talk about the two Americas. Remember that? Two Americas? We still got two Americas. We got one for the wealthy, and then we got one for everybody else, right? And what we want to do is we want to create one America.